This is a tale of courage, hubris, and eccentricity. The story of a man who decided to conquer Everest without training, without equipment, and without fear. A man who had never climbed a mountain, yet believed he could summit the highest peak on Earth. This is the story of Maurice Wilson, one of history's most madcap yet inspiring adventurers. Well then, let's start from the very beginning. Maurice Wilson was born on April 21st, 1898 in Bradford, England. His future should have been one of prosperity. He was the son of a woolen mill owner, destined for the comfortable life of an English gentleman. But everything changed when World War I broke out. On his 18th birthday, Maurice enlisted in the army and went off to war. During the Battle of Passchendaele, Maurice's unit was decimated, leaving him to face the enemy alone. Armed with a machine gun, he held off the advancing forces, buying time for his comrades to retreat. For this extraordinary act of bravery, he was awarded the Military Cross, one of the highest honors for valor. But heroism comes at a price. In another battle, he suffered a severe injury. His left arm was damaged and remained a source of pain for the rest of his life. After the war, Maurice found himself in a world where he no longer belonged. After experiencing deep psychological trauma, he sold the family business and began to travel. The United States, Australia, New Zealand. He was searching for himself, but only found troubles. In New Zealand, Maurice ran a women's clothing store, an unusual occupation for a former soldier. There, he contracted tuberculosis, and doctors said there was little hope for recovery, but Maurice didn't give up. He claimed he cured himself through fasting and prayer. And this, perhaps, was the first victory of his faith over reality. It was then that he came across a newspaper article about the tragedy of Mallory and Irvine, the two Britons who perished attempting to conquer Everest in 1924. Maurice was deeply struck. Now that's a challenge, he thought. That's what I have to do. And as you might have guessed, Maurice was a man who always saw his ideas through to the end. Maurice came up with a plan. Actually, he had two plans, both sounding like scripts for a Hollywood action movie. Initially, he wanted to simply parachute directly onto the slopes of Everest, but this proved too complicated. That's when he devised another plan. He decided to buy a plane, fly from England, land right on the mountain, and climb to the summit from there. Sure, Maurice had neither piloting experience nor any knowledge of mountaineering, but that didn't deter him. He bought a Gypsy Moth aircraft, named it Everest, and began learning to fly. He did get his license, though it took him twice as long as regular students. But this was just the first step. Maurice decided to practice in the British mountains, Snowdonia and the Lake District. These peaks barely exceed 1,000 meters, but he deemed that sufficient. Without crampons, an ice axe, or even warm clothing, he concluded he was ready for Everest. In May 1933, Maurice took to the skies. His goal was to fly to India, and from there make his way to Tibet. But problems awaited him at every stage. In Egypt and Bahrain, British authorities tried to stop him. In India, they confiscated his plane. But Maurice was stubborn. He continued on foot. In March 1934, Maurice found 3 Sherpas, members of the local people who were willing to help him. With them, he set out for Everest, disguised as a Buddhist monk. They reached Rongbuk Monastery, where Maurice spent 2 days before, deciding he could manage the rest alone. The first attempt ended in disaster. He got lost in the mountains, injured his leg, and returned to the monastery, half blind and exhausted. After 18 days of rest, he went up the mountain again, this time with 2 Sherpas. They reached the 3rd camp at an altitude of about 7,000 meters. But then the problems began. Strong winds, cold, and snowfall stopped the Sherpas. Maurice was left alone with his dream of conquering Everest. On May 29th, he set out for his final attempt. In his diary, he wrote, "On the move again, a magnificent day." But he never returned. A year later, a British expedition found his body. His diary and backpack lay nearby. He died at an altitude of about 7,400 meters. Some claim he might have reached the summit and died on his way back, but most believe he simply overestimated his abilities. However, although Maurice Wilson never conquered Everest, he became a legend, an example of how far self-belief can take a person. His story reminds us that courage and recklessness often go hand in hand. He may not have conquered the mountain, but he conquered people's hearts with his determination. After all, Maurice simply wanted to prove that humans can achieve anything if they set their minds to it. If I succeed, I will prove that humans are capable of anything. Maurice Wilson. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to support me with a like and subscribe to my channel.